name is Susan Woodward, and I'm an economist, and I study the mortgage market. In particular, I study the terms that homeowners and home buyers get on loans that they take out. And I've been studying these issues for a long time. In a previous life, I was chief economist at the Department of Housing and Urban Development in Washington. And after that, I was chief economist at the Securities and Exchange Commission in Washington. And today, I'm going to talk about the borrower's loan shopping problem. So basically, the lender's making an assessment of what the borrower knows and doesn't know and pricing the loan accordingly, with better terms going to the more informed consumers. So the lenders size you up and they give you a worse offer if they think that you're confused. Lenders also know that it's much easier for people to compare two loans if there are no upfront fees on the loan. Because basically your deal has only two terms to it. There's the cash you pay at the time you close to the lender, mortgage broker, whatever you want to call them, and the rate on the loan. Well, if the cash is zero, then you've just got the rate. If you've got two loans and one has a higher rate, one has a lower rate, that's the end of your story. Then you know enough to make your choice. The lower rate loan is always the better loan because it'll have the lower payments. It's that simple. Now, given that lenders know that it's so much easier to shop on rate alone, they're going to encourage you to go for a more complicated deal where you have to do this trade-off between rate and the cash. And so you have to resist this when you shop for a loan. The first thing you do is you get quotes from more than one lender. And when you get quotes from the lender, the lender's instinct is going to be to give you a deal with a rate and some cash. Like, for example, 3 3/4 and $600, or 3 1/2 and $2,000. That's going to be their inclination. I would say don't tell them you absolutely are not interested in a loan with no cash, but tell them you want two kinds of quotes. You want a loan, their traditional quote, and then you also want one with no cash up front. Now, especially if you're buying a house, they're going to say, that doesn't, they'll resist it. But they, in fact, know exactly where you're going because most borrowers who are refinancing are doing exactly that kind of thing. And so if you just push a little bit, they will give you two quotes. Now, you don't have to fill out a whole proper loan application in order to get a quote from a lender. They really need just a few pieces of information from you. They need to know the value of the house you're buying or refinancing, the amount of your loan, your credit score, and your income. And it's like they can really price it. They can give you an indicative quote on the basis of that. Now, when you actually go through the application process, there'll be the full drill and the income verification and the employment verification and all of that. But they can give you a quote without that. So you get your two quotes, and both loans, if they want to give you a quote with upfront fees, fine. But you tell them you also want a quote with no upfront fees. I'd ignore their protesting. You have to insist. You have to insist that you get at least one quote from them with no upfront fees. They'll act like it's weird, but in their hearts, they know it's not weird. Now, why are the no-cost loans so good? I think there are two reasons. One is the ease of comparison, okay? You've just got a rate, you don't have the cash, and so you don't have to decide how much rate you should trade for how much cash. That makes your problem a lot easier. But there's another aspect to it also, and that is the junk fees that creep in between your application and your closing. If the deal is between you and the lender that you're not paying any cash to the lender at the closing, then there can't be any junk fees that creep in. And are there junk fees? There are. When we collected the data for the FHA study, it took my breath away. We came up with a long list. I thought it was a long list, 16 different names for fees we would find on a HUD-1. So the application fee, the funding fee, the underwriting fee, the loan processing fee, the document preparation fee, the amortization table fee. But if you've already cut a deal where you're not paying any cash at the closing, then the little junk fees can't creep in. So I think that two things actually help protect the borrower who gets a so-called no-cost loan. Now we know it's not completely no cost, you're paying an interest rate, but the no cash upfront loans are often called no-cost loans, and two things protect them. One is that it's easier to shop on rate alone, and the second is that the lender can't nibble with the junk fees before your closing. Now, anybody who's had even kind of a little tangential approach to the mortgage market has probably heard the term points. And it's really a confusing term. And here the research is very, very illuminating, because what the studies show, what the numbers in the studies show, is that the borrowers who pay points, on average, get nothing in return for their points. Like in principle, you're supposed to get a lower rate in return for your points. But in practice, it doesn't happen very much. You're probably wondering at the end of the day, after all of this study, what I've told my kids and what I tell my colleagues with respect to shopping for a mortgage loan. Number one is get more than one quote. A second quote is essential. A third quote is probably worth the trouble. More if it doesn't bother you too much to go and get these quotes. Some people have a taste for it. I can imagine Terry would think it was a lot of fun to go and get quotes on a loan. Be sure you get a no-cost quote from every lender that you talk to, so that you've got several no-cost loans to compare.
If you get a no-cost mortgage, who pays for the appraisal?
The lender pays for the appraisal. Now, the appraisal is going to be the hardest one to not pay for in cash. The lender kind of even has one good reason, and that is the deal might fall through after the appraisal. But you know, the lender should be willing to do it. Appraisals aren't really that expensive, especially not when the lender has an arrangement. And the one other piece of advice I would have for you with respect to title is never, ever buy owner's title insurance. 90% of the borrowers don't buy owner's title. It's not required. It's not a good idea. Ignore all of the lender advice about paying points. You know, it's like you're just going to search for the best rate. So smile and nod, but ignore that advice. Get more than one quote. If you do business at the credit union, get a quote from the credit union. And once you've got your quotes, go back to the people who weren't the best bidder and ask them if they'd like to try again. And then don't worry about it too much, because that advice should get you there. So thank you. Now everybody looked.